It's the big culmination of the cobble classics and the most brutal of them all, Paris-Roubaix.
Also known as the Hell of the North, the queen of the classics. It is one of the most compelling races of the year. And this Sunday marks the 116th edition of the race, which started back in 1896.
Today, you are going to be watching through our big preview of one of our favourite races. And to do the preview, we've come to one of our favourite haunts, haven't we? The Strawberry Thief in Bristol. Cheers to that.
Absolutely, we've got great memories of this place.
Yes.
Hazy ones, but
yeah.
fun.
What I remember was great. Before we get on to this year's race, quick recap of what happened in 2017. There, Greg Van Avermaet out-sprinted his 4 breakaway companions on this famous Roubaix velodrome to take his first ever monument win. And it was a particularly aggressive race from the start, wasn't it? In fact, the whole way through. They averaged a quite staggering 45.2 k's per hour, which is the fastest edition in history.
Yeah, mind-blowing speed, isn't it? Now, this year's race is actually exactly the same distance as last year, so that makes it 257 kilometres long. Of that, 21% of it, or 54.5 kilometres, is on cobblestones. Now, when you compare that to the Tour of Flanders last weekend, where there was just 20 kilometres of cobbles, you start to get a bit of an inkling of just how hard this race might be.
Yeah, and the cobbles in Roubaix, they're just far, far worse. And I was recently reminded of that when doing the last 100 k's with Matt about a week ago. We started at the Arenberg Forest for our recon, and despite the fact that I know full well how bad the cobblestones there are, it's ridiculous. They're so slippery, they're covered in moss. And there's just no way you'd catch me entering the Arenberg Forest at 40 miles per hour.
No, I'm not sure there's any way you could enter Arenberg Forest at 40 miles an hour anymore, but anyway. No, to be fair though, those cobbles are absolutely savage, aren't they? This is the only race of the year really where you'll ever see riders significantly change or modify their equipment. And in many cases actually, they will take a specific dedicated bike for there. But having said that, despite being savage, the cobbles are meticulously maintained, aren't they? There's a group of people called the Friends of Paris-Roubaix who work tirelessly to maintain these sections of pavé. In fact, this year they said they've replaced 19,440 cobblestones in order for the race to take place. So incredibly commendable work there.
Yeah, they do brilliant stuff. We bumped into them actually on our preview this year, which you will be able to see on Saturday. I wonder though whether they are asked to steer clear of the 3 most difficult sectors, the ones that are given the 5-star rating. So firstly, the aforementioned Arenberg Forest, secondly, Mont, and finally, the Carrefour de l'Arbre, because they certainly didn't feel like they'd been particularly well maintained.
Well, it's funny. So Matt and I actually caught them on the Carrefour de l'Arbre last year. And it's fair to say, I don't think they were doing their best work. They were basically just throwing rocks in a puddle on a particularly iconic corner there. So yeah, maybe you're right. Maybe there has to be an element of like, well, maybe just miss that cobblestone out. Maybe just,
Maybe they send them to the bar before they maintain the 5-star sectors.
Now, the first cobblestone sector doesn't actually come until 93 kilometres into the race, but that doesn't mean that those first 93 kilometres are easy. Anything but, in fact, because the fight to get into the early breakaway at Paris-Roubaix is in itself hellish.
Why? Because you can actually get quite a good return on your investment for trying to get into the early breakaway at this particular race, unlike most of the other races throughout the entire season. And there are plenty of examples over the years of people doing well from this, and it's partly down to the fact that you don't have all that scrapping before you get into each sector trying to get into the right position. You can also choose your line, and also the pace that you keep is far more even and less accelerating.
Yeah, take Matt Hayman, for example, winning just 2 years ago from the early breakaway. Although, we say early, it took 70 kilometres for the break to form that year. And there have been many other instances throughout history. In fact, Dirk de Mol, who is now Director Sportif at Trek Segafredo, won back in the 80s, having been in a move that lasted 222 kilometres. So anyway, it's fair to say, certainly after Hayman's win, that most of the peloton, we think, are probably going to be looking to get in that early move, which is going to make it even harder, isn't it?
Yeah, because people also want to get teammates up the road so that they can then help their team leaders when it comes to the crunch point of the race later on. So now seems like quite an appropriate time to start talking about this year's favourites. There are 4 former winners going to be on the start line on Sunday. Firstly, Van Avermaet from last year, Matt Hayman from the year before that, John Degenkolb, and also Nicky Terpstra. And I guess we should probably start by talking about Terpstra's team, Quick-Step.
Yeah, they will be the outright favourites this year, and quite rightly so. They've been nothing short of phenomenal. Partly because they just have so many cards to play. Firstly, the aforementioned Nicky Terpstra. He, if he wins, will be the 11th rider in history to do the Flanders and Roubaix double. Bit of trivia for you there. But then his teammate, Zdeněk Stybar, twice been second at this race. Former world cyclocross champion. That should come in handy, you'd have thought. And then also Philippe Gilbert. This is only one of 2 monuments that he's yet to add to his collection. And he is looking ominously strong as well this year.
He is, yeah. The next rider that you must talk about in races like this is Peter Sagan, but it's quite surprising when you look through his results. This will be, I think, his 6th time participating in Paris-Roubaix, but he's never been inside the top 5. In fact, his best result was 6th place 4 years ago, and it does start to make you think a little bit more about his results in the monuments, doesn't he? Because despite those 3 World Championships wins, he's only got 1 monument under his belt. Yeah,
you know what? This tweet from journalist and author Richard Moore really struck home for me. He pointed out the number of riders still currently racing that have won more monuments than Peter Sagan. And it's a pretty extensive list, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, not least, Nicky Terpstra has now won more monuments than Sagan. But yet, Sagan almost always starts as the bookies' favourite, but has only won once. But yet, if he does win, it's not a surprise.
No.
Pretty cruel situation, isn't it?
Keep your eye out too for Sagan's teammate Daniel Oss. We actually speculated on the GCN Show this week as to whether he should potentially have slightly different role to what he has done so far this year for the team. And I personally think that given the perfect circumstances for him, he's got what it takes to take a win, surprise win.
Yeah. Watch this space. Will Bora-Hansgrohe follow Director Sportif Dan's advice?
Yeah, I'm going to totally, go overboard if he wins on Sunday.
Well, yeah,
for weeks and years to come.
It will be you. Yeah, basically, it will be all down to you. Right, what about Team BMC then? You would have thought that they would be all in behind last year's winner, Greg Van Avermaet. But you've got to wonder, haven't you, that has he actually got the legs to do it this time? After Tour of Flanders, he said he literally didn't have the legs, and actually he was satisfied with his 5th place. And so that extra couple of percent from last year seems to have vanished, doesn't it?
Yeah, last year was the perfect season for him, wasn't it? And it's not easy to replicate that, obviously.
No.
Then you have Sepp van Mark of EF Education First. There aren't many people that are more consistent than him in the one-day cobble classes. He always seems to be in the top 5 week after week, year after year. But looking back through his results, the last time he won a one-day race was 2013, which is obviously a full 5 years ago now. And even that wasn't a big one. The last big one was 2012 at Omloop Het Nieuwsblad.
Crikey. But yet he is always a threat, isn't he? You always think he's going to land the big one. What about Trek Segafredo then? Almost like Quick-Step, they are absolutely loaded with talent, aren't they? Former winner John Degenkolb, although like Greg Van Avermaet perhaps, he doesn't seem like he's quite got the sparkle from the year that he won. But Jasper Stuyven, he is super strong. He finished 4th last year and was right up there at Flanders. But perhaps the dark horse, or at least the outside bet, is young Mads Pedersen. Apparently that left field pronunciation was right.
Yes.
He let us know in the comment section, so well done, Dan. But no, he, in Flanders, rode an absolute blinder, and if he can replicate that, he's a strong bet for the win.
Yeah, he most certainly is. Then you have the strong sprinters Alexander Kristoff and Arnaud Demar, who have finished at best 9th and 6th places respectively. I personally would also quite like to see Demar take the win, because it's been 22 years since the last Frenchman won at Paris-Roubaix, that Frenchman being Frédéric Guédon.
Yeah, and he does look pretty cool in his French national jersey, doesn't he? Yeah. Right then, what can we say about the sensation that is Wout van Aert? 2-time cyclocross world champion, despite being only 23 years of age. But such was the power of Mathieu van der Poel, his arch nemesis, during the cyclocross season, that we almost started to wonder whether actually Wout van Aert was relatively ordinary. But no, his first road season this season has confirmed that that is definitely not the case. It's been breathtaking, isn't it?
Yeah, we were all talking about his ride at Strada Bianca, weren't we? But despite that phenomenal ride, there were still question marks hanging over him, because that was 180 kilometres. What can he do over 260? But we've been given two answers, haven't we? Because at both Ghent-Wevelgem and also the Tour of Flanders, he's been inside the top 10 and he's looked fine over the last 20 kilometres of the race. One thing we do know is that he's already got his Paris-Roubaix bike sorted. He tweeted these pictures the other day, complete with the brake lever up there on the tops as well, pretty old school. And I'm not sure about you, Si, but I've personally never seen a rider who has their own face painted on their frame.
No. I suppose if you are going to have your head on your bike, your head tube is the place to do it.
yeah, that is a very good point.
Maybe it's going to start a trend.
Well, maybe if we had our faces painted on the bikes, it would be on the dropouts.
Yeah, probably so. Right, back to the favourites. What about Team Sky? So they're pretty stacked, actually. You've got Jenny Moscon, who really impressed in this race last year, even if perhaps his conduct for the rest of the season wasn't quite so impressive. Luke Rowe, his recovery from injury has been remarkable, and he's looking good again this year, isn't he? Ian Stannard, he also has been on the podium at this year's race. Don't count him out. Dylan van Baarle looks like he is on the up too, but perhaps most interestingly of all, Geraint Thomas is taking to the start as well. Now, he's been away on Grand Tour duty for a couple of years, but he was long touted as a future winner of this race, wasn't he? So it'll be interesting to see how he fares. They've got a lot of potential winners, although you would be surprised to see a Sky rider on the top 7 podium, wouldn't you?
No, I think you're right. You sort of hit the nail on the head there. Then we've got the Australian squad, Mitchelton Scott, who of course have one of those previous 4 winners on the start line, Matt Hayman, and you would have to imagine he is well up for it again this time around.
Well up for it may be, but he's not shown much of himself this year so far.
No, but that doesn't mean you can count him out, does it? Because he didn't show anything before he won the race, because famously he'd broken his wrist and so spent almost all of his preparation time riding on Zwift.
Yeah, no, I don't want to sound down on Matt, but he is also quite close to 40. In fact, it's his 40th birthday coming up, isn't it?
Well, that is true, and I did tweet that when he first raced Paris-Roubaix, Mads Pedersen was only 4. But also, we can't count him out from that point of view, because Duclos Lassalle, the French rider, spent most of his career trying to win Paris-Roubaix, ended up doing back-to-back victories in 92 and 93, and on the second of those, he was pretty close to his 39th birthday.
That is very true, and I stand corrected. And you've got to say as well that Hayman has got the experience. When he takes the start line this year, he will equal the record for the greatest number of Paris-Roubaix starts at 17. And if he safely gets to the finish, he will also equal the record for the greatest number of finishes. He's dropped out of only 1 so far, so that leaves him with 16 finishes.
That could be quite a day for Hayman, couldn't it? Because he's going to set 2 records anyway. If he won, he would become the oldest ever winner of Paris-Roubaix, which would be another record.
And he'd have won as well, which is a bonus.
That is a bonus, isn't it? Right, we should also make sure we mention Oliver Nason, the Belgian champion. You can never count him out of a race like Paris-Roubaix, although we will be hoping for more luck than he had last weekend at Flanders.
Yeah, absolutely. We also should probably say quite a word of consolation to poor old Marc Soler. So he is one of 4 Spanish riders starting this year's Paris-Roubaix, and if you're not familiar with Marc Soler, he's one of the world's foremost climbers. Spanish riders famously, in general, aren't big fans of the Cobble Classics, are they? In fact, some of the teams are quite famous for sending them riders to the Cobble Classics as some kind of punishment. You would have thought that Soler might have got out of any kind of punishment by the fact that he won Paris-Nice just a month or 2 ago, but he's on the start line. Yeah, to be fair, maybe he wants to do it. I mean, he is, of course, 68 kilos, which makes him quite heavy for an out-and-out climber. He's also 1.86 m, so he's quite tall. And, of course, there are cobbles in this year's Tour de France, so maybe he's doing it as practice.
Well, there are, but I'm not sure he's doing the Tour de France. I think he's just down for the Vuelta this year.
Okay. Well, maybe it's punishment then. Maybe he's done something. Or something.
Right, well, those are the main favourites. No doubt we'll have ended up missing the winner, probably Marcus Burkhardt or somebody. But we should now give the kiss of death to 5 of them by giving our presenter predictions.
EF Education First Drapac powered by Cannondale's Sepp Van Mark.
Luke Durbridge.
Wout van Aert.
Peter Sagan.
Mads Pedersen.
My Paris-Roubaix predictions? Well, I think that ZNX Stibar is going to win Paris-Roubaix this year.
come on, Mads Pedersen, you can do it, my son.
You just jinxed him, mate. He's got no chance now.
Anyway, whoever does eventually win on Sunday will not only win the race, but also presumably get a fat contract for the following couple of years.
Yeah, good job. Mads Pedersen's already re-signed through to 2020. Now you've jinxed him.
He won't be as motivated then, will he? They'll also pick up €30,000 in prize money, albeit probably split amongst the team, and that famous cobblestone trophy, which I heard the other day weighs in at 15 kilograms.
Whoa.
So the winner will have done 6.5 hours roughly of brutal roads, and then they have to pick up a trophy and effectively do a bit of weightlifting at the end.
Spare a thought for poor old Marc Soler, because if he does manage to win, he's going to need literally assistance on the podium, isn't he? I mean, think about that. Yeah. Oh, well, there we go. Hey, here's another bit of Paris-Roubaix trivia for you. It was the first race to be televised live. That's right, back in the 1960s. And depending on whereabouts in the world you live, you might be able to watch the whole thing from start to finish. And we strongly recommend that you do try and tune in, certainly for the start bit as well, because, well, as we've already talked about, it's pretty exciting stuff.
Yeah, I'll be tuning in on Eurosport.
Of course, where we are,
In terms of the weather, well, it's been 16 years now since we had a wet, muddy Paris-Roubaix, and it's not as if the last 16 editions haven't been enthralling and exciting, but I'd quite like to see another one, wouldn't we? There's a 60% chance, as we record this, looking at the weather forecast, that we'll have rain this coming Sunday.
Yeah, absolutely. Right, I do have my fingers crossed, actually, for a bit of rain. You know, just to mix things up a bit. Anyway, please give this video a big thumbs up if you've enjoyed it, and also make sure you come back to GCN on Saturday, because Matt and Dan rode the last 100 kilometres of the Paris-Roubaix route as punishment, and also as a bit of a preview. So do make sure you check that out. It's going to be pretty entertaining.
It'll be a short video, but it took most of the day.
Yeah, and also if you can't wait for that one, why not check out How to Ride on the Cobbles, and that one is just down there. Has that got Matt falling off?
It has, yeah.
There
Make
you
sure
go.
you watch that.